So I hope you're going to give a big warm welcome to Douglas Taylor.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to come and speak at this incredible symposium. I am American, so I'm going to have to speak really fast through this, and you're lucky I don't have an accent. So you should be able to understand everything I say, no problem. And I'd just like to say this is the second time I've been to England, and the first time I was here, it was about 85, 90 degrees, and this time when I came, it was 85, 90 degrees. So I want to congratulate you guys on your really warm weather, but please get some air conditioners for next trip. Anyway, we will get started here. I give a little bit of history about myself. I know this isn't about me. It's about what can I share that can be helpful to other people. And so I think what my particular presentation is going to focus on is, in the famous words of Monty Python, now it's time for something completely different. But we'll see. Okay, so I'm just going to begin with the whole concept that theoretical physics, the sciences of theory, is recognized throughout the world as being something that is very, very acceptable. So I have theories. They might not be acceptable to anybody but myself, but still, that's the basis of learning how to understand that E equals mc squared, and imagination is more important than knowledge. So you can say that theory or theoretics and imagination are interchangeable. And yet one is accepted as sort of rock-hard science, but not really. You know, it's the changing flow of the evolution of science as it begins to go further and further into the realm of knowledge that presently isn't understood. So in my perspective, imagination is actually the ability to just image something that presently doesn't exist. That's basically Webster's dictionary version of it. So we all have that ability, and all of the individuals throughout past history who have contributed something of really great proportion to society, for the most part, have had that imagination. They were willing to break out of the box of the way that society at that time accepted reality. And what gave them that ability to do that? You know, we're talking about Atlantis as we go on, but a lot of this is direct relationship to each one of us. And I know a lot of the concepts that I'm talking about have become so familiar to me, and people might say, well, you know, it's just so far out of the box, I can't even begin to go there. But what I would like to try to do is, as the individual this morning was saying, is meet, you know, anyone else who would have a disagreement or who would want to have a discussion halfway. Because what I've learned, that the most important thing that I can do is reduce my own ability to try to understand and describe the reality that I perceive as being the only reality. So in other words, what's helped me more than anything throughout my life and throughout the spiritual progress that I have made in this lifetime is really looking at myself and realizing that I have a lot of really bad, negative, destructive attributes to my own personality. It's not just those people out there that I can judge in some way because they're blowing people up or they're doing this or that. I haven't done that in this lifetime, but I know I have in the past. And so it's those elements that are still a part of me. And as I go through this, hopefully I can demonstrate that in a way that at least makes some sort of sense. And so Albert Einstein, obviously, that's a famous statement that he made, that I think we can all kind of take that as a means of understanding somebody with a mind that was so far advanced in his ability to come up with conclusions about the infinite nature of things, speed of light, so to speak. And also recognizing that it was only because he was able to break out of the accepted realm of thought that those particular types of equations began to flow into him. But there was other reasons too, which we'll get into. Now I'll go back to my little story as I begin. Okay, so we'll go into the Bermuda Triangle, Florida, Bermuda, Puerto Rico. I was in Puerto Rico in 1977. I was there just surfing. When I was younger, that's basically all I wanted to do was surf. And I had a pretty wonderful time doing it. But as I got older, there was a certain intuitive guidance that was always pushing me to try to delve into other aspects of consciousness. And so that was really my greatest love, and my real sense of discovery was in going into my dream states and learning how we exist outside of this physical body. In fact, this physical body, the material world as we see it and accept it, is really, as Einstein helped to describe, a conglomeration of billions and billions of energy waveforms that actually have, in relation to themselves, huge spaces between them. So it's not solid, it's just we've come to understand it in that way. So we have kind of blocked our vision. We have kind of like a peripheral where we're not seeing the other elements. We're beginning to be able to connect with them and see them through instrumentation. So I'm talking about the electromagnetic field, where you have all of the different aspects that, in a sense, our planet is a giant magnet, and it is at all times radiating these powerful lines of force which protect us from the solar wind, which otherwise would basically devastate the planet. But those elements also have a larger aspect to them, a larger purpose in a sense, and that purpose is for us to understand this process that we're all a part of in growing and delving through the problems and the different difficulties that we have to go through in this life, and understanding that those things are really the foundation that we're building on, and that every time we can overcome a particular difficult problem and see the positive side of that situation, we've taken a step forward. And it's an infinite staircase that's never going to end. So it's really, really exciting. So this is where I was in Puerto Rico. And I was over here on this little area here. It doesn't really matter where I was, but I was over here. And this is an area that we visited also, which was the largest radio telescope in the world at that time. And so there was a lot of very interesting phenomenon that was happening on this island that I didn't know anything about at that time. So I was here on Sandy Beach. This is where I was basically living at the time. And the experience I had was such a powerful one. It's like one of those experiences that everybody has that literally changes the course of their life, because it opened a door, opened a reservoir where the plumbing of my mind, which had been completely clogged, suddenly began to flow with this beautiful, clear, positive information. And it was these particular individuals that I was laying in my bed, and all of a sudden I felt this intense vibration. I felt myself all of a sudden appear, and I was looking at these individuals. This is the best depiction that I've made yet. It's obviously not going to win any awards, but we got obviously planet Earth in the background. Now, if we look at the concept of, well, what's it going to take for somebody to come from another planet? We know the closest planet is 4 light years. 4 light years is something like 89 quadrillion miles. So you got to have a really fast airplane. And even then, it's going to take about, I don't know, something like 100 million years, 100,000 years. Anyway, it's going to take longer than you're going to want to, just sitting in the airplane coming over here 9 hours, I was done. I was like, let me out of here. I don't want to deal with this anymore. Even though it was Richard Branson's airline, Virgin Atlantic. My wife's British back there, Serena, and she thinks he's God, but I don't think so. But anyway, it was a really pleasant flight on the Dreamliner, but it was nothing like this. So I'm basically standing there, uplifted to a point where my mind feels like it's going to just blow off my head in a sense, and yet at the same time I felt such a warmth, such a calm, and such a peaceful feeling coming from these individuals. And the individual right here, you probably can't see it when I shine it at my computer, can you? This individual right here, well, I could see it, so it made sense to me at the time. He began telepathically communicating with me, and he didn't have a whole lot to say. Basically described a little bit about the craft, how they basically can travel through the distances of interstellar space. And he said they actually changed the vibration of the craft, which is made out of a crystalline substance, into a frequency that is no longer relative to the dimension of what we know in physics, momentum, inertia, and gravity. So it's basically being transmuted into a much, much higher frequency than of the atomic level, because it's all made of crystal. And this is what it looked like. It was just glowing. Everything was glowing, including them. And somebody was talking about halos this morning. And this is what I saw. It wasn't like something that you was be able to put your finger on as being concrete, but it was a glow. It was a light that was radiating from these individuals and from everywhere on the ship. And so I kind of felt like, wow, man, this is an incredible experience. And you can see how dark I am. And I felt really, really dark. Even though I was uplifted and felt so excited, it was like I could feel the comparison between my mind, where I was functioning at mentally, and theirs would have been like if I was Donald Trump and I was trying to compare myself to Einstein, or even beyond that. Nothing against Donald Trump. I mean, he gives gorillas a bad name because never mind. We won't go there. This isn't a political talk, but we'll get into that a little bit. So in that experience, when I came back, that was when I was 25, I had never been involved in art, had no desire for being creative, had no understanding of even why I would want to, but I did have this intuitive guidance that was kind of pushing me around, and suddenly it was getting stronger. And so this event, I think it did, as these events do when we go through a certain kind of transformation, it steps up the frequency, not of your atomic body, but of your psychic body, which we will get into here. And so, again, Puerto Rico is one of the tips of the Bermuda Triangle, which I didn't go into because it's not really that relative as to what it is or what it isn't. In my mind, there could be potentially one of these vast crystal towers that powered the entire continent. There were 7 major cities in Atlantis. Okay, these are my theories, remember. I'm not trying to quote anybody else. So these vast towers that powered the entire city wirelessly, as they basically were destroyed and distorted, they fell into the ocean, and in some people's opinion, that's one of the reasons why strange things happen there. A lot of people say, well, it's just the methane that comes up because there's a lot of methane there. But nobody's ever proven that. Nobody's ever seen a ship sink because of methane bubbles. But, potentially it could happen. So we won't get into that too much more. I'm more kind of interested in giving this presentation as sort of a visionary journey. In other words, it's like to try to take you on a journey with me where the limitations of what we believe to be reality start to kind of fade away a little bit, and we can feel that higher frequency, that higher energy where these individuals are coming from on that ship that I was on, as a means of trying to help to find people who are ready to make this transition. And not that that means you should be going out trying to find, see a UFO or see something like that. That's not even important. What's important is what are you doing with your mind, sorry about that, in relation to your fellow man. In other words, the point of all of this, as I've found, which is very, very difficult for me to comprehend, is that the main purpose of life is to help others. And actually, as you learn and apply that to your everyday life, your own life will change in ways that are beyond your wildest your wildest dreams. And so what that basically means is there's no sense of that you're going to get a reward because you're doing some kind of positive act for someone else, because there's always those ulterior motives. And so I'm not there yet. I've experienced times when I felt that way, but they don't usually last long. But, hopefully they'll last longer in the future. I didn't realize this is... So Atlantis in itself was forged by light from these higher brothers who came actually from the Pleiadian star systems. So they were able to help humanity at that time, who was very primitive, to begin to develop a civilization over thousands of years where there was this incredible technology, but it was always adapted specifically to be dovetailed into the spiritual awareness of what that technology was meant for, which was the development and the evolution of each individual. And so that was the basis of the educational system. And so they had life. They had craft that were traveling to other planets at that time. And they had very, very advanced teachers. And one of the strange things about this is we think about it. I mean, in England, you kind of have had that for a while. You got your kings and queens. Basically, they tell everybody what to do. Is that still like that? No, they don't do that anymore. It's more like back, during the Holy Roman Empire, and as, the various priests or whoever put themselves up on a pedestal, and then they were the leaders, and if you didn't follow what they said, they would, chop you up or stretch you out or whatever kind of means they had of making you agree to the fact that you're a sinner and now you're not going to go to heaven unless you agree with them. So anyway, totally different than that. No real political system whatsoever. Everyone knew where the power came from. The more advanced beings who had the most selfless attitudes were the ones who were the leaders of this particular civilization. As incredible as that seems, but that went through its own little ups and downs, obviously, but that was the basis of it. And so here I'm just showing some of the views you might see if you're on the Pleiadian planets or some of the more advanced planets. It doesn't have to be the Pleiades. It could be an infinite number. They're finding more planets every day. As you all know, the Kepler Space Telescope is up there right now, found 150 planets, and they're basically saying right now that it looks like there is something like very high potential for 100 billion habitable planets in our galaxy, and that's one galaxy. And so it's beginning to look like there's a lot more possibilities than what anybody has accepted up to this time. Here's another one. So this back here would be where the individuals from the different planetary systems would come together and would kind of basically associate and sort out whatever differences they had, because they would still have them, but on a level that is just kind of a much more positive way of realizing that their own selfish interests aren't the necessary means by which society is going to evolve in a progressive way. It's by helping each other and by sharing that they learn more about this vast, infinite, intelligent force. So this is another painting I did. So in other words, I'm not trying to push my paintings or anything like that. It's just before I had that experience, I had no art artistic abilities whatsoever. I had no desire for it. And so that's one of the things that gets stimulated as you become more consciously aware and more willing to follow your intuition. And that's what I did. And it wasn't easy, but it came pretty fast. And a lot of it has to do with other factors, which we haven't got into yet, which is the reality of past lives. And if you have developed something in a past life, but you're completely blocked off from it, you're not going to express it in this lifetime. So I was blocked off. And with the experiences that I had, it was able to, in a sense, get rid of some of that crud in the plumbing of my own consciousness so that that information and intelligence and inspiration could flow, and then I could be sort of like a channel for that information. But it's all very, very scientific. It's the same as, anything you would think of as a television receiver, and you're watching your television and it's picking up a signal from the transmitter. It's absolutely the same. It's just we are walking around, in our physical bodies, knocking on different things, going, well, that's solid, that sure feels solid. It's only solid relative to the electromagnetic force fields within the atomic structures of your fingers, and vice versa, the same with the table. So whatever it is. So that's kind of the big leap that science hasn't been able to jump into yet, is the fact that there are an infinite number of dimensions. You could call them universes. But there's also so many in the physical way that those are the ones that we're more relative to, and so those are the ones that we can begin to try to understand and comprehend. That for me? Tell them I'm busy. Okay, so we've talked about a little bit about the positive side of Atlantis. And as you can see, I have a tremendous knowledge of history here. We got Atlantis, Egypt, Greece, Rome, British, American. But we didn't need too many more than that anyway, because that's not the point. The point is what happens on the graph, how there are these incredible rises of civilizations that are just the epitome of everything that humankind would strive for, where people are living together harmoniously, have what they need, aren't, trying to steal what their neighbor has. And then these tremendous declines. And so what I've come to understand, that there's a very definite reason for that, and it's not that complicated. It's when individuals begin to become more selfishly inclined, more or less aware of the spiritual principles by which they had been living, and find that that's too difficult to continue with. And so it's a very over, many thousands of years, Atlantis declined to the point to where it actually finally sunk. And there was a tremendous, basically an earthquake that was created by a war that was taking place on one of the major cities of Atlantis, and destroyed one of those power towers, and that basically caused such a massive earthquake and then tidal wave that Atlantis was completely erased in 24 hours from the face of the earth. That should have came up before then. Okay, so now we have individuals who have spoken about Atlantis, have given certain destinations where they think it might have been. That's not really so much the point of my talk. The reason I was saying that I believe in my own intuition that it was sort of a more in the Caribbean is because of the experiences that I've had there. I feel this incredible energy when I'm there, and I feel like a lot of times we repeat similar situations and cycles that we've had throughout past times. And so my experience in going there and having the experience I had, it just reminds me that there's a very, very powerful energy there, at least for me. And there's also, a lot of other events and things that happen there that people will give you incredible basically discussions about their experiences when they were at that giant radio telescope in Arecibo. And we talked to some of the individuals who were there, and they basically said, hey, we see these UFOs all the time. These are the guards at the gate. We talked to them. And Seth Shostak, who was in charge of the telescope at that time, the SETI search for extraterrestrial life, he never saw anything. So, whether they were imagining it or whether he's unable to imagine it, or for whatever reason, we're still kind of in a state where we haven't quite reached a point where we've made that kind of contact on a vast level that we're not quite ready for it, it seems like, just by the way we treat each other still. So Nikola Tesla was another individual who had a tremendous influence from different past lives. As Nikola Tesla, obviously, he has some drawings from when he was quite young, and they look so much like what Atlantis would have looked like. There would have been these ships that were all flying without any kind of power source other than just a purely wireless and anti-gravity system. And so he was another one of those visionaries who helped, because he wasn't limited by the society as a whole, to bring about what we now have as our electronic age. And it's been talked about a little bit as to which way we go with it. Again, that's always our choice. We could take it in a bad direction, in a negative direction, or we could utilize these things for educational purposes and helping people to learn intelligently and give them ways of doing it so that it's more entertaining, like for the children to learn. So we'll get into that a little bit. So here's Atlantean Power Tower. And all transportation, water, land, and air tapped into this unlimited power source. And the tower used crystal oscillators to tap into the natural resonance of the Earth to produce virtual free energy. So it probably didn't look quite like that, but again, this is my presentation. I can do whatever I want. No. So if we get into the whole concept of pyramids, so we're jumping around a lot, but I'm going to keep going as fast as I can to get through this thing. Where's the clock? Oh yeah, I got to go fast. And so where did these pyramids come from that, they pop up all over the place? India, China, Mexico. Well, they all have their roots back to Atlantis, because in Atlantis, the pyramid was actually not only the power structure for the entire continent, but it was also the temple where these more advanced spiritual teachers would go and would live. And to a great extent, it was the astrophysics and architecture of building these cities and these buildings in a specific way so they carried the electromagnetic force, the lines where it came in and was the most powerful, and they knew how to figure that out. And so that way, when they built something, it would be built in a way that it was gaining the maximum positive potential from this other dimension, this fourth dimension, because that fourth dimension is where all intelligence and information is coming from into our third dimensional world, but you can't see it, right? It's invisible. Well, we have instruments now that can pick it up on radios and televisions, as I talked about. But also, you see somebody who you've known all your life, and all of a sudden, they died. You can't see them anymore. What happened to them? Did they just become worm food, and that's it, and they're gone? You'll never see them again? Or is there something much, much more profound that's taking place? Well, that's what was understood by everybody in Atlantis, that the spiritual nature of consciousness was simply this revolving wheel of coming into certain evolutionary cycles in a physical way, and then moving into the spiritual and astral worlds where you would go to schools and learn about what you needed to, in essence, educate yourself about, so when you go back, you can work out that problem. And so you can actually lighten the load, raise your frequency, and learn how to live on some of these more advanced planets. And this thing should buzz off here in a minute. There he goes. So airliners travel all over the planet using anti-gravity. The central temple is the spiritual power center and is the residence of the master teachers of Atlantis. So now we'll get a little bit into this if I have time. And here it is. This is the Atlantis spiritual temple and power tower. If you can just kind of visualize kind of what's happening, is that you're walking up the esplanade towards this incredibly beautiful, powerful place. And as the doors open, the light is so intense that you can't even see. And you actually can't walk into this particular temple unless you have advanced to a certain level. Not because they say, hey, you can't go in there. You don't look like you're the right color, or you're not the right nationality, or, you know. It's strictly the frequency by which you are vibrating at has to be in resonance with the frequency inside the temple. If not, you're going to just be fried because it's too high a frequency. But these Atlantean teachers also had the problem of functioning in that frequency and going out and helping the humanity that was on lower levels, and they would be drained because it was the battery. It was the polarity of the positive always flowing into the negative, because that's the way it works. So they had to have ways of recharging their batteries, their consciousnness, so they could continue to their work. And so that's where they would go into these temples, and basically you would see, here's 4 of them. They're basically recharging their battery. And so they would come together in these temples, and they would just, in a sense, merge their consciousness with this vast, infinite, intelligent crystal that was like a giant magnet, in a sense, recharging their batteries, or like a battery. So they're being recharged so that they can continue to function. And this is true with everyone. It's just on the level of these individuals, things are happening so fast because their consciousness is so speeded up that the power can move out of them very rapidly, and they would be stuck in a negative state. So now getting more into just the simple basics of what we're talking about. Everything is energy vibrating at specific frequencies. I think that science has validated that. That's not even my theory. That's just the way it is. And as we can see, basically, the visual light spectrum, look at where it is. It's this tiny little slice. So this is what we see. That's the actual photons reflected off of all of the different elements within our purview of our reality, of our world, the physical world. And that's the level that we can see. Now, if we go to ultraviolet, we can't see it anymore. X-rays, gamma rays, infrared, radio waves. So there's higher and lower ones as the way we've come to measure them. But still, it's kind of just a validation of the fact that what you see and what you hear and what you touch and what you taste and what you feel is a very, very limited frequency of what is really out there. And of course, a lot of times it's in our dream states where we have the most powerful experiences, because we're not limited by these things in the same way. Not that I haven't had lots of nightmares, because I have. And now we're going into the concept of past lives. This would be the educational system on Atlantis. Everybody would talk. The psychic body is made up of countless billions of waveforms that are creating the frequency by which they were created. Everything you do is being taken into that psychic body, 4th dimensional. You can't see it, but it's what's recreating your physical body. So here's some of the different things that I've been involved in. War, murdering people, killing people, all of these different elements. And you can see that one has a very foul energy to it, a very foul frequency. So negative waveforms created from destructive past life experiences cause physical, psychological, and spiritual aberrations. And so once the negative experiences are recognized and accepted, healing and a better alignment with your higher self is a result. So that's basic past life therapy, which I have applied to myself, and it has totally been validated that it is a reality. It's very, very difficult to see it because it takes a lot of, in a sense, raising your frequency to get to a point where you can start to see these cycles as they're evolving around. But anybody can begin to recognize how this process works, which is you simply become aware of your thoughts all the time, 24 hours a day. There's never can be a time when you let your guard down. You don't have to meditate. You can do that if you want. You don't have to do any specific thing but keep track of your thoughts. Because every time some negative, reactionary thought comes in, some emotionalism, boom, you're going to get tuned in to something that is related from your past on a similar frequency. And so you're pulled down and you're not rebuilding the psychic body progressively in a positive way so that you could live in a much more positive and happy type of state of mind. So that's basically what the psychic body is. And again, here's just another illustration. There's always the positive and the negative. And so all of these different sine wave frequencies are oscillating between the spiritual fourth dimensional body and the physical body. And so the physical body itself is so hard to understand. Why does somebody get cancer? Why did they get this weird disease? Where did this come from? It's always something that has already existed within the psychic body, almost always. Sometimes there's accidents, but that particular aberration as waveform energies is oscillating into the physical body, and eventually it will repeat whatever that negative condition was. It might have been the plague in the past, but now it's aberrated waveforms. You're in a different time scenario, so it can now be cancer. It could be a cancer situation. A lot of cancers just disappear on their own. So there is this tremendous healing of all of these different elements that these teachers in these higher dimensions, which I probably haven't spoke about enough, are attempting to help us with, but we have to be open to it, and we have to realize they can't do it for us, because then we just become addicted to it, just like the heroin addict becomes addicted to his drug. So this is, as a psychic amati, as you look down, it's made up of all these little waveforms, and this would be one of the waveforms itself that has specific information impinged within it. This would be a more positive one, say, just because it's symmetrical, it looks balanced. And so, but each one of those little sparkly energy body fragments is relative to not only a part of your body, recreating it, but also events that have happened to that part of your body, and they are going to re-express themselves in the future, guaranteed. And so this was really the founder of Poseid. I was trying to find my, I had an audio of a lightning thunder thing, and I couldn't find it, so. That's the power of Poseid. But Poseid was really one of the individuals who was living in that completely primitive society about 50,000 years ago, but had a knowledge and had an awareness that was way, way beyond the average person, but nobody really knew because he was still stuck in that culture, in that society. And so these individuals had set up this particular project for him to go in from the higher spiritual worlds, incarnate into a physical body, not unlike a lot of the other avatars. And in this particular situation, it was set up in such a way that these individuals from the higher planets in the Pleiades came and actually would take him into this ship, and they would raise his frequency in a way that couldn't be done to anybody who didn't have his development. It would be way, way too fast, too much. It would blow their mind. But he was capable of doing it. So very, very rapidly, his frequency was raised to the point where he could begin to start establishing. And because he was he was known in that culture, they accepted him. Whereas the people on the spaceships, that was some gods or whatever. Anybody ever heard of ancient aliens? Well, the aliens always did it. You know that, right? Anyway, I don't have to tell you about that. Giorgio will tell you that. So anyway, in this case, it was always King Poseid, as he became known, that the mythology down through the ages is always the same, Everything gets mistranslated, gets changed by whoever won the war, whoever wants to have the control over the people, a million different things. But he was actually the individual who established the beginning of Atlantis, and over a 40,000 year period, it developed into one of the most incredible paradise civilizations on Earth. Again, King Pasai, that should have came up sooner. And so this is simply what you might see if you were enjoying Atlantis back then at that time. You know, the whales are jumping, the birds are flying, the beautiful blonde-haired women are feeding the birds, and that's about it. That's not very clear, but that's all right. So, you know, you can just feel the sense that the people had an affinity with nature in a way that they felt like they were a part of the actual animals that existed at that time. And so the majority of Atlanteans were vegetarians. They didn't like killing animals. Not all, and there's nothing wrong with eating meat in my understanding either. But it was such a refined atmosphere that these more advanced teachers, they got their food, their sustenance just from this attunement with this higher frequency intelligence. And those were only the very most advanced. So Isis and Osiris, where did that come from? You know, we see it on the Egyptian walls and stuff like that. And they were real people. They were Atlanteans. It was a king and queen of one of the major cities of Atlantis, and they were the most advanced individuals in Atlantis at that time. True spiritual masters, and they knew what was coming in Atlantis, and they were able to escape aboard a submarine, and they traveled to Egypt, and they reestablished the Atlantean way to a certain extent on the Egyptian continent. So, you know, you wonder, where did all of these different, you know, belief systems, these different individuals and deities and all of the mythology of all of these different civilizations come from? Many times they came from actual real people and events that simply have been changed. The truth is the hardest thing to maintain through a series of civilizations because it's always going to be changed according to whoever wants to be the next leader, the next power structure of that society. They're going to just start changing it a little bit. It could start out so slight, and then eventually it could be the complete and total downfall of an entire beautiful civilization, which it was. But they reestablished this great society and civilization in Egypt. And this would be Isis standing in her temple. Egypt at that time, the way that I painted it anyway, was much more lush. There wasn't so many, it wasn't just a big desert. Whether that's true or not, I have no idea, but that's the way I painted it, so that's the way it goes. And again, where's Atlantis now? Is it still here? Does it exist underwater? Or does it exist within our hearts and minds as the reality not being important, what we call it, but being important that we understand the principles by which it functioned and how it developed to the degree that it did, which was the actual love and sharing and understanding that your fellow human beings, no matter what, who, where, whatever, are your brothers and sisters in spirit and are evolving just as you're evolving. And so whatever you can do to forward that understanding and forward that belief system within your own consciousness, you're going to be doing some kind of positive work. In our society, that seems, you know, crazy. I mean, we got Trumps, we got Boris, whatever his name is. I don't know, he might have been a good guy. I don't really know much about him. But I don't want to get political. I guarantee you that Trump is a jerk. Couldn't be otherwise. He thinks money's going to make him president. And it could. America's a weird place. So this is one of the books that you could read. I just want to give you a little bit more information. It comes from the Uniris Academy of Science, which was a school that I was involved in for many years. And I'm kind of doing my own thing now, but this is actually a painting I did for the book. But it's an incredible book, and it talks about the history I'm talking about in detail. So it's quite unique. And then there's my book, Soulic Journeys. Now this is some really hard-hitting information in here. It's so up to date, so prevalent now. I wrote it in 2000, so it's 16 years old. But I'm still selling them. I still got a big box of them underneath my stairs. But no, it is futuristic, but it goes through a lot of the stuff that I've just been speaking about and relates how I went through my own, in a sense, evolution of spiritual consciousness and became creative and artistic. I work as a carpenter, but there's a lot of ways of incorporating whatever you do into this creative, inspirational state of mind, and it's always the most positive state of mind that I can ever get into. So I still try to focus on that as much as I can. Is there any time left? I don't even know what time it is.
You've got 10 minutes left.
10 minutes? Holy crap. How fast did I talk? Okay, well, in 10 minutes, we can go back into some of these concepts and relate about how in the society that we're living in right now, there's so much discord, and we look at it and we say, well, it's just like things are just so mixed up. My wife's an astrologer, a Vedic astrologer, Serena, and of course, every time something is happening, she gives me the lowdown on the planets. Oh man, your planets are bad. You got bad planets. The world's got bad planets right now. Which she's right a lot of the time, but I'm not an astrologer, and so it's hard for me to really comprehend that the planets are basically showing us how our life is going to unfold. But there's way more to it than that. And so you can talk to her if you want to know any more about that. But for me, one simple example, I guess, would be we were going to Puerto Rico again. We went this one year, and it was the most incredible trip. Everything just was, it was like, how it is when everything's just going your way. It's like when you're building something, and you just simply can't make a mistake. That's not typical for me. Usually I'm cussing and screaming and yelling and throwing hammers and stuff. And but when everything's just flowing, that's the way it was that year. And she said, before we left, she goes, oh yeah, everything's going to be really, really perfect for that time period. And it was. And then the next time we went, she goes, oh man, you shouldn't go. It's going to be bad. I go, I don't believe that crap. Because that's me. That's my judgmental negative self, which I've had to, it never goes away, really. You just got to keep recognizing it and try to, alleviate its influence on you. And of course, first thing that happens is I crashed the rental car, and then we had a couple more times where I was driving somewhere and the car went flat. The waves were crappy, and I almost got drowned when I was trying to surf some waves that were bigger than I should have been out in. And so, she had kind of predicted all that. Does that mean it was a validity that was being shown from the way that the planets and stars are aligned in our solar system? I don't know. But I know I have to have an open mind. I need to have an open mind. I should have an open mind, not only about that particular element, because it is something that goes back into ancient history, and it is very well known that you can do that. You can predict things that are going to take place if you really have that sense of being able to rise above all of the negative frequencies and vibrations that are so much a part of the mainstay of our society, and can allow that positive, intelligent information to flow. Just like tuning in to, you tune into channel 14, or what channel was Trump on? Anyway, turn into Trump's channel where he used to fire people, He goes, you're fired, you're fired. That was his big thing. And so that's going to be a horrible thing. It's like Jerry Springer or whatever. It's just feeding on everybody's negative emotions. Or you can tune into some incredibly beautiful nature documentary that's showing you the beauty and the wonder of life, and how, whatever way it may be, how it regenerates itself, and how plants reseed, and how they continue to grow and to flow. And death is not the end of anything. Death is just like the seeds are being dropped for the next generation. And it's the same thing with your consciousness. The next generation, so to speak, of your consciousness is going to evolve and grow and hopefully be a positive influence on whatever culture, whatever society you're in. So I hope I made some sense. And thank you so much for listening to me, and I appreciate being able to be here and speak to you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Douglas Taylor.